Yo, guys, I hope you're well. So, guys, we are fresh off of the Conservative leadership election and we are down to the final four. And I've been watching it today, I've been watching some highlights, and it's just a shame that it's all a little too late because they should have been there at the start of Prime Minister's questions to hammer Keir Starmer for what went on in this early part of the summer. But because the Tories are basically rudderless at the moment, they weren't in a position to do it. But having said that, the likes of Badenoch, Cleverly, Tuganak, etc., have said one or two really good sound bites today about Keir Starmer and about certain elements that we, the common sense majority, have been banging on the doors trying to be heard about. So let's hope that whoever wins the Conservative nomination for leadership is true to their word and comes through with what they're saying. But at the end of the day, people, it could well be and probably is too little and too late to help us, the common sense majority, in what we have been going through these last few weeks, months and years. We're at the end of our tether and we really need someone to stand up and be a voice for the voiceless. Because at this moment, people, it's not looking good for any of us. So guys, that's not what I wanted to talk to you about. I'm not feeling too good or too great, so hopefully my voice is carrying across. I'm hearing it's all raspy, etc., etc., so I hope that you guys can hear me. So I basically am a historian. I love history. I absolutely love history, no matter whether it's British history, European history, or world history. I love history. So I always like to look into and do audits on people and audits on situations. And this is no different. So again, people, we're looking into two-tier Keir. And at this juncture, I'm looking at something else that came into my inbox. And there's a guy by the name of Peter Osborne. And he is a journalist, broadcaster. I think he made his name at the Telegraph. I might be wrong on that, people. Let me know if I'm wrong. And he's now got his own channel, Double Down News, I believe it is. And this is where I've got this excerpt from. And here, Peter Oborne, excuse me. And here Peter Oborne is talking about the mainstream media, the media, and two-tier Keir. And also he's basically talking about how the media has played its own role, and not a good role at that neither, in being able to allow Keir Starmer to get through unchallenged. So guys, I'm not going to beat around the bush, not feeling too great, so hopefully I've made sense on that. But basically Peter Oborne is saying that the media have given Keir Starmer an easy ride. And this piece was, I think it was taken 3 months ago. I think this was taken in early July of this year. So guys, let's listen to it.
For the last 4 years, Keir Starmer has been in charge of a brutal, inhuman, pitiless political machine.
A brutal, inhuman political machine. And that's over the last 4 years since he became the leader of the Labour Party.
But you simply wouldn't know about that if you read or watched the mainstream British media. 5 years ago, Boris Johnson was elected Prime Minister and no questions asked, even though his election campaign was a pack of lies. Much the same thing has happened with Keir Starmer this time. His brutal authoritarianism, well documented by the way, has been totally ignored by the mainstream British media.
Do you hear that? So basically, this brutal authoritarian has almost been whitewashed. Do you know what we say in sport, where brutal regimes pour money into sport, particularly like in my sport, boxing, to make their image look better? It's a similar sort of thing, I believe Peter Oborne is saying about how the media has enabled people like Boris Johnson, people like Keir Starmer in the eyes of the public. And the way they've enabled these people is by not letting us see and not giving us the true picture about who these people really are and what they really stand for. And to me, that is disgusting.
The reason why client journalism is a worry is that Keir Starmer has a lot of serious questions to answer.
Remember, people, this was done back in July. I think Keir Starmer had just become the Prime Minister, or maybe this was done just before the election, because the election was July the 4th. I don't know the exact date of this interview, this video, but this guy, this chap, Peter Urb'n, is literally telling us that Keir Starmer, well, who is the real Keir Starmer? And I've been actually delving into certain videos over the last couple of months to try and find out just who is the real Keir Starmer.
He tells lies, just like Johnson. He's actually quite authoritarian. He's run a very ugly political machine on his way to power. We need to know about that.
So Keir Starmer has run an ugly political machine on the way to power. And yeah, let's talk about that. So in this picture here, we've got forget Dishy Rishi. Keir Starmer is the Downing Street daddy. So sometimes the MSM are at fault for giving us a whitewash view of people, and they have their favourites that they wish to come into the seats of power or whatever, and they will do everything in their power to literally do a magician's trick to make it seem that whoever they want as the next leader or the next ruler or whatever it is comes to pass, no matter how good or bad that person really is. So for instance, you see here all these like Valentine's Day love hearts, etc., and it literally fools the public into actually believing that this is true.
Instead of which we get quite a lot of articles making him out to be this sort of valiant patriot.
Keir Starmer, Britain's new leader who takes politics... Really? Really? You're kidding me. Guys.
Patriotic, good chap who has somehow...
Hold on. I might have to go back through these headlines. A decent and capable Prime Minister. That's exciting. Oh my goodness. 90 days in and I think we're eating our words.
Drifted to the top without really meaning to. Several years ago, Al Jazeera produced an extraordinary film based on the mass leak of documents, the biggest in British history from inside the Labour Party machine, which revealed a scale of hostility inside Labour to immigrant communities, particular Bangladeshis in East London, Muslims more generally, also contempt for black people particularly, terrible abusive language used about one of the most distinguished of modern Labour Party politicians, Diane Arbet, the first black Labour woman MP. It revealed a right-wing clique inside Labour running the party and targeting vulnerable communities, driving them out of the party, even spying on them. For somebody who cares about democracy, this is very sinister. But that element of Starmer was completely ignored by the mainstream media.
So he's literally said that the Labour Party was actually spying on its own members, but the MSM absolutely and wantonly and willfully ignored that and never let it out into the public domain.
My view is that there are deep questions which Starmer should have been asked to answer before he was elected Prime Minister. They simply weren't raised.
Deep questions for Starmer to have been asked to answer before the election, and those questions were not even raised. So there was a report that was commissioned when Corbyn was the leader of the Labour Party, and then when Keir Starmer became the leader, he basically suppressed that report. We did everything in his remit for that report not to come out, and that was the Ford report. And the Ford report was commissioned to inquire into bullying, racism, sexism within the Labour Party. But it was long delayed by Starmer because it exposed widespread anti-black racism within the Labour Party itself. Starmer did little, if anything, in terms of action in the findings and the recommendations of the Ford report, which speaks volume of the man. The report highlighted private WhatsApp messages that exposed deep factionalisation in Labour's efforts to combat anti-Semitism, and perhaps this is the reason why Starmer was so keen to take away our social media from us. The inquiry looked at the extent of racist, sexist and other discriminatory culture within the Labour Party workplaces, the attitudes and the conduct of the senior staff of the Labour Party and their relationships with the elected leadership of the Labour Party. Starmer shelved and ignored the Ford report, which he had commissioned because its findings were damaging to the Labour Party and the Labour's hierarchy of racism. The Ford report found that the black Labour staff suffered under the party's hierarchy of racism, and the report found out that some Labour staffers raised concerns about a hierarchy of racism and felt forms of discrimination were taken more seriously than others. And many staff felt that specific problems were only dealt with when it was politically expedient and or essential to do so, and that the party's more recent steps to address the problems with anti-Semitism, for example, have not been matched by a commitment to tackle other forms of racism. It is why, and this is a quote, and I think it's from Richard Sedan, and he said, "It is why you can count on one hand the number of senior black women in the Labour Party, and on multiple hands the number of black people that have left the party." And whilst the 860-page dossier, which was leaked whilst under Jeremy Corbyn was leader, was intended to be a part of the party's submission to an ongoing investigation by the Equity and the Human Rights Commission into anti-Semitism, it advertently raised concerns of anti-black racism too. For many black and Asian members of Labour, the Ford report's findings of racism in the party are no surprise, but that didn't stop them being ignored by swathes of the mainstream media. And that is a nice little bookend into what Peter Urb'n was saying about the mainstream media. The mainstream media will only give you information which is or which backs up their own narrative. If the narrative doesn't and the agenda doesn't back up what the MSM wants, it won't even report on it at all. No matter how bad or damaging that information is, they will not say a word. Not even a dicky bird, not a word. So it's interesting to see this, because on the one hand you'll see Keir Starmer talking about racism and getting rid of racism, but when it's endemic in its own party, how can we believe a word Keir Starmer says? How can we believe a word? And in its treatment of people like Diane Abbott in the run-up to the general election, that was kind of strange, wasn't it, people? So it's just a way, and it's particularly with the media, they need to be impartial. So when they give us information, we need to have that information in a balanced output. I know they'll have all the spin, this, that and everything else, but sometimes it's what they're not telling us which is more important than what they are telling us. So the Labour Party is saying all these words and all these platitudes and whatever whatnots and nonsense about racism, this, that and everything else. But I always say verbs, not words, but it's their actions. And if anyone wants to see it, I'm going to try and get a link to the Ford report. It's 860 pages, so I don't think anyone will be reading it too soon. But it's really important, I think, that people need to know everything about a situation before we can make a decision and comment on it. So the Ford report exposed the anti-black racism in the Labour Party under Corbyn and Starmer. But you wouldn't think it ever happened, would you? Because it was never reported. So there you go, people. I hope you enjoyed that. It's just a little bit of an eye-opening there into Keir Starmer. Who is this guy, Keir Starmer? But also on the media itself. It's really important, because I keep telling people that there's two things. When you hear information being told to you and being basically served to you up on the news on a platter. It's really important to listen and to decipher what is being said by the media. But sometimes it is more important to decipher and to listen and to find out and to dig deep into what is not being said by the media. If you can get a nice little equilibrium between the two of what the media is telling you and what the media is not telling you, then you'll get the package of the full picture. But until we get that, we will never know. Guys, let me know down here in the comment section what you think. I haven't come across Peter Urb'n before, so I'm going to try and listen to a few more of his videos and just to see what he's saying. But I think he raised a very pertinent point there. So the media literally made people like Boris Johnson and Keir Starmer because they wanted them to be out there front and centre in the public eye. They didn't show you all the bad bits about the people. They showed you just the good bits. Are they playing with a straight bat? I don't know. Anyway, guys, I'm not feeling too great, so I'm going to log off there. But make certain, guys, that you look after yourselves, you look after each other, and please make sure you come back to the next Urban Bars reaction, guys.